So many times I sit down with friends of mine that went to medical school, they're practicing, they're not practicing, and we talk about healthcare. And it's always like, man, healthcare is a mess. And it's like, yeah, I agree. You want another drink? And then it's like, and one of the biggest things that we talk about is like, how did we get here in the first place? Like, why is it such a mess in the first place from the eyes of a provider? And I've got my theory. This is what I'm going to share with you. And there's always other factors, but I feel like one of the biggest reasons why healthcare is a mess is because they don't teach doctors about business. And I remember when I did my undergrad, it was essentially the liberal arts version of business. It was called Commerce, Organizations, and Entrepreneurship. And that's no longer around anymore as a major. I guess it was too many words. And it was learning about business. But even in those classes, I felt like it was a very academic version of business. What happened was, this is a story I'll tell where this is not the gist of this video, but I thought I'd tell the story because it's so meaningful to me. And I'll tell the extended version later on. So when I was in my freshman year in college, it was a crazy experience because I walk into my dorm and like Dustin Hoffman is there, the actor, because his daughter was moving in down the hall. And I was like, what world did I just walk into? And then I walk out, and I like cars a lot, and there was this Maybach that went by. So this was 2005. And when the car came out, it was a car that Mercedes built to compete with Rolls-Royce. It wasn't very successful because it cost as much as a Rolls-Royce, but nobody knew what it was. So people were like, well, I'm spending $500,000 on a car. I wanted to say Rolls-Royce, and not a Maybach or whatever, however you pronounce it. But I liked the car. It was a cool car. So I just chased after this car, and not knowing that cars go faster than people. And long story short, this car went into this garage, and I was trespassing, and then I met the guy in the Maybach, and I ended up having lunch with him, and he became a good mentor of mine. And his family has started a Fortune 50 company, and I'll go into this story in another video if anybody's interested. But he allowed me to basically be a fly on the wall and see how he ran his businesses, and that opened my eyes to what was possible, leveraging business as a tool. And I took that framework throughout my medical training, and that's when I was able to see medicine from a whole different spotlight, which is how I came up with this theory of why I think that medicine is the way it is today in a negative sense. And it's because doctors or providers in general aren't willing to market themselves, because we're such good technicians. We're trained to see patients, we're trained to heal, we're trained to always be there from a technical perspective. And sometimes when people focus on the technical perspective, it's easy to lose sight of the big picture. It's like, oh, of course it's done this way, or of course I'm doing it this particular way. And what happened in healthcare, what I saw was that, in the beginning, doctors just want to be doctors, right? Doctors still just want to be doctors. I want to treat patients. I want people to come in. I want to be able to heal them. I want them to be happy. I want them to I want to follow up with them, make sure they're okay, and that's it. They want to be healers, most doctors. And what happened was when the whole insurance system came about, employer-sponsored healthcare, government-sponsored healthcare, a lot of doctors will say, well, I don't have time to deal with all of that stuff. I don't want to deal with the bureaucracy. I don't want to deal with the infrastructure. So the insurance company said, great, well, in that case, why don't you join our networks and be willing to take a discount on your services, and we'll market you to our client base. And because of that, you can focus on being a doctor, which is like, oh, that's awesome. Somebody else takes care of the marketing and sales for me. Patients show up. All I have to do is hang up my shingle, and I do what I love doing, which is great. And it worked for a little bit. And then what happened was all the doctors realized, hey, this is a great deal. So everybody joined the networks. And then it's like, well, if everybody's in the network, how do you stay competitive? How do you How do you refer patients to this person versus the other person? Well, then let's create sub-networks, right? You can be part of the network, but you can be preferred, non-preferred. If you're preferred, you're going to take a further discount. You're going to get paid another way. And ultimately, it's just more money out of the doctor's pocket. That's what I saw anyways. Or maybe it's like a performance incentive. If you do this, according to these things, then, the government pays us on these metrics. If you adhere to these metrics, then we'll pay you a little bit more. And if you agree to these terms, then you're going to be part of our preferred network, and we're going to funnel more patients to you, because if these guys aren't willing to play along, they want to do things that they always have done, and you're willing to do what we say, then we're going to give more patients to you. And that's just like a cascading game where the networks then become smaller and smaller and smaller. And now, in the mid-90s gave rise to these HMOs, which are health maintenance organizations, which means that now it's like, hey, if I go to a primary care doctor and my primary care doctor is now a gatekeeper for everybody else, then those doctors will essentially who are in the network will get the patients, and the ones who aren't part of the network won't get the patients. And that was great for the people that were in the network, and then the networks got smaller and smaller and smaller, and each step it added more administrative burden, because who's doing the referrals? You need a whole different system to do the referrals. Now you need, and then maybe it's prior authorization, where the insurance companies have to give authorization in order for you to do something. And I don't know if these are entirely accurate, but I'm seeing a lot of these videos online where surgeons have said, oh, I was in the middle of a surgery and the insurance companies came in. They gave me a call, said, I need to talk to you now. I scrub out of surgery. I go talk to the insurance company, and they say, well, that patient can't be there. You got to wake him up and send him on, half open home. It may be all exaggerated, but that's a result of agreeing to these more and more restrictive covenants, because providers didn't want to market themselves directly to the end user. And that's one of the biggest reasons why was that providers really lost control of the experience. It used to be, if you look at healthcare, it's really an exchange, a marketplace, right? It's an exchange between patients and providers. And if both sides are unhappy with the experience and the system continues to grow, then maybe we got to reevaluate. Maybe the market isn't doctors and patients. Maybe the real customer is the insurance company, or the real customer is the government. We're just simply products being sold, just like you're on Facebook, and if you're not paying for anything, although we're paying a lot for healthcare, then you're the product. So maybe the realization was because of what's happening, because the doctors relinquish their marketing and sales abilities, we're no longer the customers anymore. We're the products of the system. So that's what I realized. And a part of the equation is, if the providers can now take back some of that autonomy, I think you're going to have a lot more providers that are happy to rejoin the system or be a part of the system. And then also you're going to see a lot more transparency, and you're going to see a lot less of these multi-steps of these middlemen that take a lot of the costs out of the system. So that's what my theory is on how did we get to today, and also perhaps shining some light on how we can get out of it. And I remember I was talking to a good friend of mine who actually he had some layoffs in his company, and he says, why don't you talk to some of my salespeople that I think they can help you? And I talked to some of their salespeople that was in the medical space, and they said the only people that are hiring now are people that are these big medical groups that want to market directly to employers or their end user in some way. And that was a really interesting shift, because a couple of decades ago, it was really about how do we consolidate through insurance companies. And now what we're seeing is that insurance companies are really like payment processors, and that the providers are trying to go back and market directly, because they realize that they can cut out a lot of the administrative burden by going on a subscription model with their end users directly. So more to come on that, but that's just some of my observations, and again, my personal anecdotal observations.